right, well, this is the last message in our series, Fake News, and you're going to love it. It's going to be very easy to process, to digest. You're not going to have to think. Just sit back and relax. What's the name of the series? Fake News. Everything I just said about this sermon right then is fake news. This sermon is going to be challenging for lots of us, all of us. You know, some movie directors, they say, I do one for them and I do one for me. I do one that appeals to the masses, and I do one that I'm really kind of into. Well, last week I did one for you. That was the one that was all about sex, okay? Being a man of God, that's not really for me. I'm not interested. But this one, I'm glad y'all laughed. This one is for me, and it should be for you. I'm going to try to make it as clear as I can, but you're going to have to work with me on this one. I think it's important. So our culture is changing rapidly, and one of the ways it's changing is that it's coming to the conclusion, and it's actually stating out loud, you know, we just might do better without religion and without religious people. We might function better as a society without God and people who believe in God. It's really the idea that we can be fully human. We can be better humans. We can be a better society if we just got rid of all that God stuff. If we didn't have that, we wouldn't have all of those old, outdated, restrictive rules. We would be free to create the kind of world that we desire. We would be able to create a reality where everyone is happy and everyone's at peace and everyone lives a meaningful life. We would create a world where the fifth dimension would time travel from the 1960s to 2019, show up and start singing the age of Aquarius. And everything would be flowers and peace and love. All we have to do to be fully human is get rid of God. We do not need God to be human. And I'm going to tell you that is fake news. It's an illusion. It's a lie. If we ever get to that place, we're going to end up someplace really dark. Because what makes us human, the ability to have truly meaningful lives, the ability to make real moral choices, the ability to chart our own course, to make decisions that determine our destiny, to have that kind of freedom, what I'm going to try to show you this morning is that none of that is possible without God. So let's see if I can get into this and somehow make it make sense to you. So part of this fake news, we don't need God to be human, is this. We don't need God for life to be meaningful. Now, I'm not saying if you don't believe in God, you can't live with a sense of meaning. I'm not saying if you don't believe in God, you can't have a sense of purpose. What I'm saying is that without God, your sense of meaning is a farce. It's a joke. And the joke's on you. Let's see if I can convince you of that. One of the things that makes us different as a species is that we find ourselves asking the question, why? If you've ever had a 2-year-old, you know that shows up in the human psyche at a very early age. Why? And one of the questions that we seem determined to try to ask and answer is, why are we here? What's the purpose of my life? Why am I here on this planet? Now, people never seem so lost as when they can't answer that question, when they don't have a sense of purpose or meaning. Dr. William Breitbart is a physician who provides end-of-life care for terminally ill patients. He works at New York's Memorial Sloan Kettering Hospital, and he has worked a great deal with patients who are terminally ill. He early in his career noticed that when people were given a terminal diagnosis, many of them lived robustly all the way up to the end. Others almost immediately gave up, and some even requested enough medication that if taken all at once, it would put an end to their lives. And he thought maybe those that gave up and those that wanted to end their lives, the reason that they were in that place is because their pain was particularly excruciating, much more than those who continued to live a robust life. But his research showed him differently. Patients even told him the reason that they gave up is because they had lost meaning in life. Here's what Breitbart wrote. What I suddenly discovered was the importance of meaning. The search for meaning, the need to create meaning, the ability to experience meaning was a basic motivating force of human behavior. See, people never seem so lost or defeated as when they have no purpose to live for. And people never seem so alive or so powerful as when they do. But here's the question I want you to wrestle with. Can you really have a sense of meaning if there is no God? If what's given rise to this universe, if what's given rise to you are just particles, just electrons and protons and quarks, if that's all that there is, and if that's all that you are, is it possible that the impersonal has really created the personal, that the meaningless has created beings with meaning? Sir John Templeton wrote these words: "Would it not be strange if a universe without purpose accidentally created human beings who are so obsessed with purpose?" A universe that has no purpose has created beings that thrive when they have purpose and that wither up when they don't. Is that really what's happened? Well, Richard Dawkins, often thought of as the leading voice of what we used to refer to as the new atheist, here's what he said: "The universe we observe has precisely the properties we should expect if there is at bottom no design, no purpose, no evil and no good, nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. A universe with no meaning or purpose has created beings who need a sense of purpose." Does that really make sense? Is that possible? In an interview with Slate.com, Dawkins went on more to describe his views in greater detail. The lead-in to that article was this: "Why are we here on Earth?" To Richard Dawkins, that's a remarkably stupid question. The interviewer said, "It seems to me the big why questions are, why are we here? And what is our purpose in life?" Dawkins, it's not a question that deserves an answer. The interviewer pushes back. Most people would say those questions are central to the way we think about our lives. Just what I'm saying, that sense of why am I here? What's my purpose? Am I living well? This is central to what it means to be a human being. Dawkins says, if you happen to be religious, you think that's a meaningful question, but the mere fact that you can phrase it as an English sentence doesn't mean it deserves an answer. It's not a proper question to put. It doesn't deserve an answer. There is no why to your existence. And if you find yourself asking that question, why am I here? What is my purpose? The only reason you're doing that is because you're rather stupid, according to Dawkins. Here he is one more time. A molecule springs into existence, which is self-replicating, and then immediately you have the possibility for Darwinism, for natural selection to occur. Then you have this extraordinary process whereby things start to get more complicated and start to appear as though they've been really designed for a purpose. If you look carefully for what that purpose is, right now you're going to find out your purpose in life. It turns out to be to replicate, to pass on, to propagate that very same DNA. What is the purpose of life? Well, Dawkins says it's the very same, whether we're talking about the life of mite, a mole, or a man. And that is to replicate your DNA, to keep your genes in the pool. That's why you exist. That's the only why you'll ever get. So beings without meaning, your parents, gave rise to you, a being without meaning, and many of you have given rise to other beings without meaning, your children. Now, before Dawkins came along, the greatest atheist philosopher of the 20th century was a brilliant man, Cambridge professor, Nobel Prize winner by the name of Bertrand Russell. One of his famous essays is titled A Free Man's Worship. It's a little lengthy, but it's very insightful, and the point he makes is dead on. He says that man is the product of causes which had no provision of the end they were achieving, in other words, no purpose, that his origin, his growth, his hopes and fears, his loves and his beliefs are but the outcome of accidental collocations of atoms, that all the labors of the ages, all the devotion, all the inspiration, all the noonday brightness of human genius are destined to extinction in the vast death of the solar system, and that the whole temple of man's achievement must inevitably be buried beneath the debris of a universe in ruins. All these things, if not quite beyond dispute, are yet so nearly certain that no philosophy which rejects them can hope to stand. Only within the scaffolding of these truths, only on the firm foundation of unyielding despair, can the soul's habitation henceforth be safely built. Is there any meaning to our lives, to our loves, to our accomplishments, to our creativity, to our race? No. There's only unyielding despair for those who will look at the reality of the universe and our place in it. Now, you may say, well, I don't need a sense of meaning. I can do just fine without it. Good for you. But man up, and you teach these truths to your children. You teach them there's no purpose for you, and there's no meaning to your life. And when they come to you and want your help in finding something meaningful to do with their future, tell them it doesn't matter. When they're hurt terribly with the girl, with the boy that they thought they loved, tell them it doesn't matter. It's meaningless. When they struggle with whether or not they should pay a price to be a person of principle, integrity, and character, tell them it doesn't matter one whit what they choose. Nothing does. When they think about destroying their lives with drugs, sure, whatever you choose, it's the same. All you are is dust in the wind, as Kansas is saying. That's all you are. You don't matter. If you believe that, good for you. Just be honest and tell your children that as well. Now, that's kind of a tough way to go, isn't it? And so people, and see, Dawkins and Russell, they're not the enemy. They're just really telling us what they believe, and they have enough integrity to be true to what they believe. Not everybody does. It's hard to live this way, and so people whose philosophy, whose godless universe would lead them to this place, they play games. Some, they just don't think about it. They dress up, they play human every day, they act like they have real meaning and purpose in their life, and that's how they get by. It's dishonest, but that's how they do it. Another way that people get through this is they just lie to themselves. There were a group of philosophers who did this. They are called the existentialists, men like Jean-Paul Sartre and Albert Camus. They came out of World War II, and they became very influential for a good period of time. And they were very honest in saying that human life is absurd. Our universe is without meaning. But here's the move they made. They said, we will look at the absurdity of the universe and we will defy it. We will act as if we can live meaningful lives, even though everything is meaninglessness. And somehow that will help us to rise above reality. You know, the most important thing anyone can do is live in reality. Your life will change once you decide that you're going to face reality and live in it. Now, these philosophers who thought that the world was meaningless, the universe was meaningless, human life was absurd, they were in their heyday during the Vietnam War. And many of them thought that it mattered greatly that they speak out against the war. Many of them thought that it was meaningful, the words that they said. It was important, it mattered that they speak out, even though their philosophy said that nothing mattered. If you can't live true to your philosophy, maybe your philosophy is wrong. Maybe something deep within you knows a greater truth than what your mind is telling you. See, if you find in your heart this belief that life really does matter, that your choices are not meaningless, that what you do with this life is incredibly important. If you wonder, why is it that I've wondered what's my purpose, why am I here? That's your heart telling you something. And the reason your heart is telling you something is because the Bible says God has put eternity within the human heart. God is speaking to you when you see this philosophy is not sufficient to explain who you are. Your life has meaning. Some of you may be here wondering, does my life matter? It does, because God created you. He created you in his own image. You matter desperately to him. So much so that he sent his son Jesus to come and die for you. Those people who believe that we can be truly human without God, they need to face the fact that without God there is no meaning, there is no purpose, and we're no longer truly human in the way that we've understood in the past. Something else, this idea that we don't need God to be human tells us, is that we don't need God for morality. Now be careful here, because I'm not saying that if you don't believe in God, you can't be a moral person. I don't believe that. Many people who don't believe in God live exemplary lives, and many people who do believe in God live deplorable lives. But here's what I'm saying. Without God, there is no morality that applies to all of us. Without God, there are no absolute moral truths. There are only individual, subjective moral preferences. Let me try to make sense out of that for you. Let me give you an example of an absolute truth. This is not a moral absolute truth, but it'll help you get what I'm trying to say. At sea level, water boils at 212 degrees Fahrenheit. That's an objective truth. Doesn't matter what I think about it. Doesn't matter what I feel about it. Doesn't matter what I think I've experienced with boiling water. That is an absolute truth. Vanilla ice cream is better than chocolate ice cream. That's a subjective truth. That's my belief. Unless we're talking about Bluebell homemade vanilla, then I think that's an objective truth, that's better than anything that ever existed. But remove Bluebell out of the equation. Vanilla ice cream is better than chocolate ice cream. But you may prefer chocolate ice cream. And you'll say, oh, no, my truth is that chocolate ice cream is better. Well, there's no independent ice cream authority board that we can take our different opinions to and say, tell us which one is really true. Why? Because that's a subjective truth. That's a personal preference. And here's what I want to tell you. Once you remove God from the equation, there are no absolute moral truths that apply to all of us. There are only subjective moral preferences, and you have no right to tell me or anyone else how we should act. Now, I'm not trying to make cheap points here. Kai Nielsen, he's 96 years old, but during his day, he was a leading atheistic philosopher. Here's what he said. We have not been able to show that reason requires the moral point of view, or that all really rational persons should not be individual egoists or classical amoralists. Reason doesn't decide here. The picture I've painted for you is not a pleasant one. Reflection on it depresses me. Pure practical reason will not take you to morality. You see what he's saying? He says, I know there should be some kind of morality that applies to all of us. I know I should be able to come up with some kind of reason that says you shouldn't be an egoist, that you should really live a moral life, but all I have is reason, and reason doesn't take us there. Dawkins again. He says, the universe we observe has precisely the properties we should expect if there is at bottom no design, no purpose, no evil, and no good. Nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. In the universe of Dawkins and Nielsen, there's nothing that is wrong simply because it's wrong. There's nothing that is good purely because it's good. There's nothing inherently good or evil in the universe. I had this brought home to me. A few years back, I had 2 conversations within just a couple of months with a couple of young people who really had what you would call a postmodern philosophy. Now, postmodernism is very difficult to explain. It's very complex. But one of the derivatives of postmodernism is the idea that everybody has their own individual truth. And every truth is just as good as any other. So the first of these 2 young people was a young man. I was talking with him about this. And I could see he had this postmodernism approach to morality and ethics. And I said, so given what you believe, how could you say that what Hitler did was wrong, killing 6 million Jews? And he said, well, I couldn't say that he was wrong because I don't know what was in his heart. I said, what could possibly have been in his heart that would have made it okay for him to put 6 million innocent men, women, and children in the ovens? Well, I don't know, but I can't say because I don't know what was in his heart. A little while after that, I had a conversation with a woman, same kind of postmodern thinking. I hadn't learned my lesson. I thought, well, maybe I can outsmart this one. And I asked her the same question. And she said, I can't say that he was wrong. It would be wrong for me. I would have tried to stop him, but I can't say that what he did was wrong. Now, you can think that somehow these kids, these young people, that they're the enemy. They're not. They've been taught by our culture that without God, there are no absolute moral truths, and so everybody has their own truth. They're the product of our culture. They're not the problem. They're the result. These are people that we care about and we long for. We want them to know that there are moral truths because God is moral, because God is a righteous being. So some things are right and some things are wrong, and our lives work better when we get in line with that. But that's where they are. They're just simply being true to what they've been taught. Now, if you don't believe there's a God, first of all, you're really welcome here. You're not the enemy either. We're just trying to have a good conversation. I'm just trying to see if I get where your philosophy leads. I think I do. But if you don't believe in God, that's fine. But don't ever tell anyone how they should live, because you have no right to do that. You have your truth, they have their truth. So don't ever tell anyone that prejudice is wrong. That's your truth. It may not be somebody else's. Don't tell anyone that racism or homophobia is wrong. Don't tell anyone that slavery is wrong. That's your view. If someone else may have a different morality, may be true for them. Don't tell anyone that they should curtail their activity so that they don't damage the planet or they don't damage the climate. And you say, but if you damage the planet and the climate, you'll hurt other people. Who cares? That's your philosophy. That's your morality. It may not be someone else's. Grow up. We're animals. We get what we want. We take what we desire. We protect our own, and that is it. That can be a philosophy that people live by. Maybe different than yours, but once there are no absolute truths, you can't tell them that what they're doing is wrong. Tell me that I have to be faithful to my wife. Tell me that I have to honor a contract that I signed. Tell me that I have to pay someone a living wage for the work they do for me. Look, I may do those things because they're advantageous to me, but don't tell me I have a moral obligation for any of those things. Because once there are no absolute truths, you don't get to speak into my life. Look, if your heart tells you some things are right, not just for you, but they're right because they're right. And if your heart tells you that some things are wrong, not because they're wrong for you, but they are just wrong in themselves, that's your heart telling you that this universe without God is not big enough to explain who you are. You are a human being. You long for meaning. You are a human being. You know that this is a moral universe and that you're meant to live rightly. Let that voice within you lead you, and it will take you to the one who created you. It will take you to God, and it will take you to Jesus. Here's the last thing that this philosophy that we don't need God to be human tells us, and that is we don't need God to be free. We don't need God to be free. Now, I will tell you that without God, there's no freedom. And I don't mean that the way you may think. Without God, all this universe is particles. It's electrons, it's protons, it's quarks, it's electrical impulses, it's chemical reactions. And if that's all this universe is, that's all that you are. And what that means, if that's all you are, it means that you were pre-programmed to live the life that you're living. You could do no different, and it was pre-programmed the millisecond after the Big Bang. It's just dominoes falling into place for billions of years, and you're the domino that's now falling. And you've been pre-programmed to think, feel, to have the illusion that you are making real choices. But if there is no decision-making center within you, something that we've called a soul or a spirit, I defy you to prove that you make free choices without there being a God. Look at what Philip Johnson wrote. It's a great philosopher. He said, at the end of the day, you either have in the beginning were the particles, or in the beginning was the logos, which means divine mind. If you start with particles, and the history of the universe is just a story about the rearrangement of particles, you may end up with a more complicated arrangement of particles, that would be you and me, but you're still going to have particles. If you begin with an infinite mind, now we're talking about God, then you can explain how finite minds come into existence. What doesn't make sense is the idea of getting mind to squirt into existence by starting with brute, dead, mindless matter. And that's what we are. If there is no God, no infinite mind, just brute, mindless matter. Are you really free? Not if there's no God. It means that you have been programmed. You're as programmed as any computer if all you are material. So if we're not free, there's really no responsibility. And what that means is that the men who took down the towers on 9/11 and the men and women who rushed into those towers to save lives, they're just the same, just flesh-covered robots playing out the script that was written when the Big Bang burst into existence. The men and women in our church when Hurricane Harvey hit, who took their boats, and some who bought boats so they could go down to the waters that covered Houston and Beaumont and other places and search for people they didn't even know to save their lives. You don't need to applaud them. They are just automatons, just doing what they were programmed to do. And those of us who sat on our couches and worried about ourselves, we're the very same thing, no different. And those of you who hate Donald Trump and those of you who love Donald Trump, you didn't choose those feelings. You didn't choose your political views. You didn't make a choice for your political party. That was all just written into your being because that's all that you are. Friends, if there is no God, you and I, we are robots. Our script has been written. We will have the illusion of freedom, but there's nothing within us that could possibly do anything different than we've done or that we're going to do. But if you think that choices really matter, if you think you're responsible for the life that you live, your heart is telling you that the universe of Dawkins and Nielsen and the world of atheism is not big enough to explain you. You need a bigger beginning than they can offer. I cannot believe that human life is absurd. I cannot believe that the love I have for my wife is all about me getting my needs met, and that's it. I cannot believe that the care that I have for my sons is nothing more than my wanting to make certain that my genes are replicated and kept in the pool. I cannot believe that the beauty of Beethoven's Ninth was nothing more than a bunch of particles accidentally colliding, and that beauty was the result of that accidental meeting. I cannot believe that the deaths of United States servicemen on the beaches of Normandy 75 years ago, this week, to rid the world of fascism and oppression, I cannot believe that sacrifice was meaningless. I cannot believe the sacrifices that people made to end slavery and to fight for civil rights. I cannot believe that the lives of men like Wilberforce and Gandhi and King, that they don't matter, that they weren't choices, that they didn't decide in face of great cost, knowing what it would mean to live that way because they loved people. I cannot believe that the sacrifices that people make to be persons of integrity and character, that those are meaningless. I think those things matter. I think those things matter. I think those things last long after the sun and the moon and the stars and the galaxies are gone. And if you believe those things matter, then I want you to follow your heart wherever you may be. And it's going to take you past the beginning of Dawkins and Nielsen and others who are without God. Because your heart is telling you there is something real. There's something that matters. There's something that makes you human. And people like Dawkins do not have a clue as to why you are who you are or what truly makes you human. Your life matters because you matter to God. You have a sense of morality because God is a moral being, and your choices matter because God has created you with the freedom to choose your course in life. You are human. Let me read this final thing for you. This is a beautiful statement. It comes from the book of Psalms, chapter 8. It says, "When I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have ordained, what is man that you are mindful of him, and the son of man that you visit him? For you have made him a little lower than the angels, and you have crowned him with glory and honor." Human beings, Christians, have the greatest understanding of the glory, the honor, the beauty, the majesty of being created a human being, for we are made in the image of God. Let's pray together. Lord God, we give you thanks and praise that you have created us. There's not one person here who's an accident. There's not one person here who was brought into being by a mindless, pointless universe, but by a mindful, loving Creator. Lord, I pray for those persons who wonder what's their purpose in life. Why are they here? I pray for those people who struggle. They find themselves full of guilt and shame because of the decisions they have made. And their heart tells them that their moral choices matter. They need to be freed of that guilt. They need to start over. And I pray they'd feel your grace this morning. And I pray for those who feel trapped. This world has told them that they're free, but yet they discover that they are trapped by things that are unworthy of themselves. And I pray that even now as we come for communion and we ask for grace, I pray that your Spirit would come into their lives and begin to set them free from desires and compulsions and habits which have held them bound. Lord, our answer is found in you. Our answer is found in Jesus. And we turn now to him as we receive this sacrament that gives us hope and life. And we pray it in Christ's name. Amen.